And I'll show you, we were talking about basing everything, or a lot of this, on primary source material. And so I'll show you what I was working on that I didn't realize you were here.
Okay.
And in fact, I have a radio on. I'm going to turn it off.
Okay.
And I'm going to vanish from your site for 2 seconds. I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm doing a new book, and it won't be out for a whole more than a year, but it's going to be finished in October. And the name of the book is Abe versus Jeff: The Civil War as Seen from Both Sides. And some of you might know that I've done a book that's kind of its partner in crime. That's George versus George, the American Revolution as seen from both sides. And it's really, really popular in schools, so my publisher wanted me to do a companion book, Abe versus Jeff. So right now I'm working on the art for page 35. And as you can see, all those balloons, I don't know if you can see this very well, but all those talk balloons are real quotes from real people who were busy fighting in the Civil War, and it's telling why they fought. So this is brother against brother, because North and South had brother against brothers fighting each other and getting really mad. It tells what they really wrote to each other. And this tells why one of the slaves was fighting for the North. And I don't know if you can see, and this is one of the guys who says, for those of you, basically it's a real interesting quote, but he says, for those of you who don't believe it, these guys are really terrific fighters. And then down at the bottom, these guys are slackers, so it tells why they went and hid out during the war, because they didn't really want to fight. And the quotes are hilarious. And then this right here is a woman who was disguised as a man who fought in the war, and what she said. And this guy over here is a private who says, if I were to desert, as many are doing, I would feel worse than a sheep-killing dog. And so when you find these real quotes, they are much more pungent and much more memorable than anything that I could write myself. And that's why I like to put them in my books. And can you hear me clearly? Or
yes.
Okay.
You had a radio on. We have like a jackhammer behind us that we don't have control over, but we can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a echo on me. I know that you had looked at some of my other books. And first I want to say something about using primary source material. You know, all these people that I write about in history, they dropped dead a really long time ago. And so I get to look at all their most private letters, and their journals, and their diaries, and basically be a spy is the nice way to put it is that I'm a detective, and the real way to put it is that I'm sort of spying on these people from a long time ago. So it's kind of like I can rip the roof off of their houses and look inside and see their love letters, or when they had fights with each other, and put it in my books, and nobody's going to sue me because they lived many hundreds of years ago, in some cases many, many hundreds of years ago. And I not only use quotes from the real people, which are typically my favorite thing to do, but even their speeches are appropriate in some places, and those are very easy to find online because these people are so famous that they're. So I include the Gettysburg Address, of course, alongside these great quotes from people who are often upset or furious or happy or hilarious or making jokes. And I know that you looked at some of my other books, so I know one of them was this one, How Ben Franklin Stole the Light. And this is a good example for the people who teach the younger grades of the use of, this is you, I'm getting rid of the thing that says we have a talking moment. Okay. So even when I do the artwork, I use as much original source material as I can. And so when you open up How Ben Franklin Stole the Light, you can see all these pictures in the background. And I don't know if that comes through clearly. You have a copy of the book. So if you look in that book, Benjamin Franklin's turning cartwheels on top of his own inventions that he drew himself. So that's, that is primary source material. He would keep pictures. He was a good artist. People had to learn how to draw in those days, and they were serious about it. And he drew all of his inventions, and what I did was take the black and white inventions and comp them up together, put them in the background, just pump the color because they were really black and white, and then you can see his inventions, including some that failed. So even the great Benjamin Franklin could fail, and kids like to know that. This is a ship that he designed down in the corner, and he wanted to sail directly into the wind, which you can now do. But he thought that if you overlapped a whole sails, that it would be easier to sail directly into the wind forward with the wind. And it didn't work very well. So when I talk to kids about it, I tell them that being an inventor and being a scientist is making experiments. Sometimes even the great, famous, brilliant people fail, including Benjamin Franklin, and that was one of his failures. So it's a fun thing to do. And by the way, while we're talking, if anybody has any questions or comments or disagreements or queries, please chime in. We have a small group, so it's really easy for me to answer what you have to say. In the back of all my books, I have material that might be helpful to you because it tells where the sources all came from. It's much more complex in the books for older kids. So you probably all know this, but when you go to the back of the book, in all these tiny letters are every quote source, especially for the older readers, and an abbreviated bibliography of all the books that I've used, or not all of them, but some of the more important books that I've used to get my information from. And that includes the quote sources is, of course, the primary source material. And these are the books by adults. So for the new book that I'm working on, the stack of books that I use to do this is huge. And so I use Team of Rivals, and I probably use 50 books, and this is one of them. And every one of them is this wide. So Team of Rivals I'm trying to do a 64-page book, and this is just a good example. This has 916 pages. The bibliography isn't in the Ben Franklin book, but there's a history. I see somebody thumbing through there. So there's a history of other material about the great Ben Franklin that you can read at the end. But in all of the other books for a little bit older kids, the bibliography is really complete. And in fact, this one, this book is What Darwin Saw. And it has plenty of quotes in it, and this is another one that uses talk balloons in it. So I'll find you a prettier page. But anyway, there are talk balloons on all of these pages. I'll find you something more stunning. And the source material was so extensive that I had to put it on my website. I had to put a lot of it on my website because it was way longer than the book. So here's one of the first pages, and all of those pieces in there are quotes. And that sounds pretty boring if I just say it's quotes, but if you read them, it's awesome. Like Charles Darwin, you'd want to meet him. And he was a young guy. He was really cool. The kids would like him a lot because when he went on his voyage around the world, he was in his early 20s. And so he's close enough to their sisters and brothers' ages that it's fun. And says, here he is when he first gets on this ship. He used to get seasick all the time. And I don't know if I'm picking the best quote, but it just is right here. It says, I intend sleeping in my hammock last night. I experienced the most ludicrous difficulty in getting into it. My great fault was in trying to put my legs in first. And that's true. He tried to get in the, if you've ever tried to get in the hammock, and you put your feet in first, the hammock's going to flip over and you're going to fall on the ground, and that's what he did. So I like making humans out of the people in the book and telling what they did that was good, bad, and indifferent so that they were real people. And that's what you can do by using their quotes. He's very eloquent sometimes. And so here's this rather stunning picture of what he saw in South America, the things that he saw. And he was on his way there, and he becomes poetic almost for the little older kids that read this. Forests and flowers and birds I saw in great perfection. If the eye attempted to follow the flight of a gaudy butterfly, it is arrested by some strange tree or fruit. If watching an insect, one forgets it in the stranger flower that it's crawling over. And so when I drew the picture, I actually went to visit these places so that I know how to draw them. And so here's the butterfly, morpho butterfly that I put in there is from my photographs taken in Ecuador, and the parrot also. And I went to the Galapagos Islands to study how to do it. And I count that as primary source material if you go to the place where something happened. So I took whole bunches of photographs, and here are, this artwork right here is from photographs I took in the Galapagos of the iguanas and the other animals that were there. So when your kids decide to do primary source material, you can have them go outside and take them to the zoo and find out what this or that animal is doing, and they can draw pictures or collect, brochures or leaves or anything that they would like to use as original source material to augment anything that they might write. So if they're writing about a lion, you could have a field trip to the zoo. Or if they're writing about a dandelion, you can have a field trip right outside your back door, and everybody can go see what's crawling around on the dandelion and what it does, and they can draw pictures of it, and they can augment their stories that's maybe one page, and they can have a nonfiction story about a dandelion or an ant that's right outside your door, or something more exotic like going to a museum and looking at a dinosaur and seeing what its bones look like. So that's a fun thing to do. Let me think. I have spoken with Amy's classes before, and also with another group of teachers about this book, How We Crossed the West, The Adventures of Lewis and Clark. And I'm not quite sure if you've seen that one, but that was easy to get the original primary source material for, because it was much easier than going to 300 books. There it is. Because I just went directly to their journals, and you can find them in your public library. It's pretty astounding. You can read all their journals. So what I did was go to the library, check them out forever, and try and think of ways to get the library to let me renew them 5,000 times, and read the whole things. And that's before you could read them online. I did this book in 1997, so it was much harder to go online.
So, Roz, we have a question about that book. Since you read both of their journals, we talked about different perspectives of, whenever you're looking at a story, different accounts from people that were there and how they are sometimes very similar or different.
Yes.
What did you find when you were reading their journals?
They had their accounts lined up with each other because they went to the same places and everybody was honest. They just might tell a little bit different story. And so, and it was readily apparent what had really happened here if you read and compared several journals. So Lewis and Clark weren't the only ones that wrote journals. So there were other people on the trip who did, and you can look and see what they said too, and you can compare. And some days one would write and the other one wouldn't, and we think that maybe, like, William Clark might copy some in somebody else's and put it in his, and they'd be exactly the same, and vice versa. But they were supposed to write it up, for Thomas Jefferson, so they had to write in it every day. Every day it's covered. And Meriwether Lewis, some days he got depressed and he didn't write anything, but somebody always would write.
Okay.
Tended to be depressed. Where it was really readily apparent is in what Darwin Saw. He wrote a journal during the trip. And later, and he was a kid, but it was a really good journal. So later, when he came home, he wrote a book about it. And he based it on his journals, but he prettied up the language a whole lot, put in more science. And so when I wrote this, I had to decide which version of his material to use. So I'd take the most exciting version, or I would take something that explained something really clearly but needed to get across. And that's why that link on my website explains how I picked the passages from that book that I thought were most appropriate. And you can actually go on there and you can compare the different source material and see which one I used and why. It really is on there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and who else had questions? Because I'm really ready not to just keep yakking, and you guys can ask stuff.
How do you handle vocabulary? So if you've taken there's something you want to use, and the vocabulary is beyond the age level you're writing to, how do you handle that?
I tend to not talk down to the kids, so it may be slightly above their level, but I'll have words that I do explain within the text, and I'm especially doing that with my new book. Here's the cover. This is a little dark. It's a little too dark, but this is the cover for Abe versus Jeff, and there are a lot of terms in there that nobody would know, and it doesn't matter how old or young they are sometimes. And so in parentheses, I'll write what it means, and I'll try to do it in a non-intrusive way so that it's not jarring. Here's the title page, which is different from the cover. We prettied everything up with really cool type because there's a lot of copy in this book, and so if you just see you saw this one with all these talk balloons in it. If you just see the copy that I got, it looks like there's no room for art at all. This is the copy. You wouldn't think you could put a picture in there no matter what. But it's a little fancy when we put it together with the type. And on most pages, there's an explanation of certain words. It doesn't have to be on this one, but some of the words are hard. So it's either obvious from the text and pictures what that word means, or I explain it.
Okay. Thank you.
And I do write with a different vocabulary for little kids than I do for old kids. Just, I don't have a book that says this text is good for grade 2. I don't do that, but some people do. Just me. And the very first book I ever wrote did have a limited. The very first book I wrote was fiction, and I wrote it before anybody I've ever met was even born. I'm really old, and they wanted me to make it appropriate for first and second grade. I sent the story to the publisher, and they wanted me to make a simpler vocabulary, and it was really fun. And some of the words were a little harder. We were allowed to have a certain number of words that weren't on your vocabulary list, so I did that. But that was a long time ago. I will tell you that it was in the early 70s, so it's been a long time since I wrote that. So,
Roz,
yeah.
You kind of enlightened me to the fact, whenever you had talked to my class a couple years ago about how the kids could use, and you mentioned that with the dandelion, but about how they could be detectives and use primary sources and gather primary sources from the people around them. I don't know. Do you remember that?
Yes. I do. I'm not sure exactly all the things I told you, but I should have brought it up, but I have a whole list of things like that. One good primary source, and this is one that you used in your class, and it was really effective, was you can interview real live people, because even things that happen today are nonfiction. And I write mostly, not entirely, but mostly nonfiction. And so if you pretend that you're a radio announcer, a TV announcer, or somebody who writes in newspapers or magazines or blogs online, you can go interview people. So what we did that was amazing was everybody could go home and talk to people in their family, interview their family about cool stuff that they did in their life, and then you could tell us some stories about the coolest things that they did. And this group was amazing because, I don't know, do you still have any of those? Somewhere I have these wonderful, fantastic quotes about one kid whose father was like Superman to him, and he got all these Superman pictures, and the guy could ride on top of, when he was a teenager, he would ride on top of cars that were speeding down the highway, and he told stories about that. And that's fair. You don't have to be all serious when you write these papers. You can have fun. And one told about her grandmother who, what? Were you going to say something? Oh.
How do you remember all of this?
One told about her grandmother who was from somewhere in Latin America or in Ireland. I can't quite bring it up in my brain right now. And also another person from China. And they had no technology at all. And so they told what their life was like with no technology. And the kids were amazed that they didn't have such a thing as a TV, and what they wore and how they worked on their farms. And these kids were so inventive, and everybody had to illustrate what they wrote. And so if and their parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles or brothers or sisters who had done all these things were excited to tell them about it, because nobody asked them about, when they jumped off of a high building or rode on top of a car or jumped out of an airplane or did construction work or were in a war. And some of them were in wars. And so some kids, when we've done this, they've talked about what that was like and how they got to America. And I have ones that did it by telling how they were boat people, and they told how they did it, and the kids wrote it. And it was so amazing. They did such a good job that they had a party at the school, and everybody got to read what they had written, and the parents all came, and they had refreshments, or their grandparents and significant people who came, and they were applauding, and I guess some of them were crying and everything, and it was great. And they were writing nonfiction, and so we were really proud of the fact that they did that. Another way that we did it, I did this with another school, and what did we do? This group of kids was working on the history of government, which is like the most boring thing you can ever think of in the planet. And so to make it work, they went and they did things like interview the mayor and ask what a day in the mayor's life was like. And what they did was make a book. So the kids divided into small groups of like 4 kids. There was 2 classes combined, and each of the 4 kids had a topic in government that they would cover. And so they covered all the branches of government and illustrated it. And I told them they could do any kind of illustration. It could be photographs, it could be cartoons, political cartoons. You could take pictures on your cell phone and show them anything you wanted. And they came up with this fantastically well-written book about government. And I'm trying to remember, they did the history of a bill. And so to do the history of a bill being written, they had a piece of paper that had a face on it, and it said, "My name is Bill." And he did this cartoon walk through the steps that a kid has to take or that a bill has to take when you write a bill. And he went through all that, made jokes about it, but it was also accurate. And then people in the national government, they showed pictures of them and told little stories about them. And it came out to be a nice thick book, and some nice person bound it for the class. And they printed it out so all the kids had a copy of this book about this boring topic. And now they'll remember how government works because they wrote it themselves, and they didn't have to learn it out of a boring textbook. And they drew pictures of it. Another thing that I love to have kids do is when they're doing history and geography is to do maps. So a lot of my books have illuminated maps in them, and I ask kids to do this. So this is from the Lewis and Clark book, and it shows the route that the explorers took. And it has pictures of what you really would have seen along the way. So the different ways that the Indians dressed and what animals were along the route, anything relevant is included on the map. And when you color in a map and draw pictures on it and write labels on it, like I added the states, even though the states weren't really there, and you can see the disclaimer, just so you know where you were. But when you write that stuff on there, your kids remember it. And so they're going to learn geography by having a good time and reinforcing it, not just as a mental list of states, but also a picture in their head and what went on in that place. And another really good example of that is John Smith Escapes Again, which unfortunately is no longer available except through me. But I love John Smith. I think he was great, and I think he was a hero of America, and nobody realizes what a hero he was. And I have not only a big map right here at the beginning, but it has interstitials all through the story. John Smith was an escape artist, and he could escape from any horrible thing that ever happened. And so I put his major escapes in here, and at the beginning of each chapter, I had these interstitials. So there's little maps of where he was in the world and what adventures he had that I couldn't include in his escapes. And then his big escapes would be on the next page. And the thing that's cool about maps is that you can put compasses in them, and you can put the wind blowing from the corners, you can put sea monsters and little ships in the ocean. And the kids they actually have a lot of fun doing that. And then as it goes into the chapters, it tells what he escaped from. And so in this particular picture, which I've randomly opened to, he was wanting to have a better life than being just a farmer, so he decided to be a soldier and go where there was a war and fight. And on his way over there, he was from England, and he got on the ship with a bunch of Italians who were Catholics, and there was a storm. And he was a Protestant, and the Protestants and Catholics hated each other. And so they decided that since he was on the ship, it was his fault that there was a storm, and they threw him overboard and tried to basically kill him. And that's all true. It's not made up. And so it tells how he escaped from situations like that. And the whole, I think there are 13 maybe in the book of things he escaped from, because he went all the way around the world. So for each chapter, we draw a map, and the kids go nuts about it. And one time with Lewis and Clark, when I went to speak at a school, they had made a map the size of a huge auditorium hall. And every kid had worked on the same map, different portions of the map. And they put it on the stage where I was going to be. So it filled up the whole stage in the auditorium. And every single piece of it had been done by different kids. That's a fun thing to do together to remember geography. And I have awesome pictures of it. So it was great. So drawing is a big part of it. It turns kids on. It helps them to remember stuff. And being a spy, that helps them to remember stuff if you tell them if they can find these quotes. So I did, besides all those big fat books that I read, there are short books that you can get for almost no money, like $1, off of places like Amazon. So for this book, this really is a little for older kids, because I do talk about slavery a lot in the book. So this book is a paperback book that you can probably get in your library, but if you can't, you can order it across this says $2.50, but on Amazon it's less. And it's quotes from all these people who were slaves. Everything in it is a direct quote of slaves that were collected and edited by this guy, Norman Yetman, and they were done in the 30s during the Depression, and so they had to interview people who had originally been slaves. And some of these people were over 100 years old, and they're so clear, and they're so real, and, hard that it's very, very interesting to read those. Then I read all these books about Abraham Lincoln, and there are more biographies of him than anybody on the planet, I think. And it's certainly more books about him than any other person's biographies in America. But for short things, there's this little book. This is another one that's $2.50, but it's less on Amazon. And it's The Wit and Wisdom of Abraham Lincoln. And all of them are sourced, so that when he gives a quote, and I mark the ones that I like, when he gives a quote, it tells where they come from. And so I'm randomly opening the book, and it says, remark to a quote, to quote a gentleman, quote, who had, quote, solicited a pass for Richmond, and then it tells the dates if they have it, and the location, and so forth. And so I have to put that in the back of my book for each and every quote, so I can only use the ones that we know exactly where it came from. And if it's so wonderful that they don't know, then I put in my source, which is this, and that the quote source is question, is the name of the person that said it may not be included, but this name is in the collection. So I'm as specific as I can possibly be. So they can find stuff like this pretty easily and a lot easier online. When I do the artwork of the people, so for example, here's George versus George. Every time they're on a different page in the book, they have to be the right age. So I need to know what they look like at that age. So I go online, and I used to do this by hand before you could go online, and I look up Google Images, and I find paintings that were done during their lifetime of them, portraits of the two Georges, and I see what year they were done, and then I make sure that they are correctly interpreted in the book. So here's George Washington from a painting at the age when he was first married, and you can see that he has this reddish brownish hair. And in the How We Crossed the West book, the Lewis and Clark book, I had to make Thomas Jefferson the right age too, and I did find a portrait of him that was done in the exact year that told that he told Meriwether if he wanted him to do the trip. So there's Thomas Jefferson, and his hair was white by then, and he was a redhead when he was younger. So that's how I knew. And I found real books that he read in his library, put them in, and real glasses that he wore, and a real map. So there you go. So the words count and the pictures count, and the kids having fun doing these things, that really counts. It helps them remember. And they can interview people, and they can find this original source material. They can become spies, and they can take field trips to find certain information that's nonfiction, because not all nonfiction is history. And it's a very fun thing to do. And look out for this book when it comes around. I have a whole bunch of pictures from there, but we could probably do that another time. And I'd really like to answer any questions that you have, or any comments I'd like to hear too. So please feel free. This is kind of your turn to be on the spot, and if you don't say anything, I'll probably have to cry. So
does anybody have any questions or comments?
So you can give kids, you can work this into anything you're studying. And so I don't know at what point each of you has divided up subject matter, but you can pick any topic that you're studying in school, from science to social science to math to geography, and you can have the kids write a very fun page, or story about all of those things that are true. And there are plenty of ways to do it. And is anybody studying anything specific right now that their class is excited about? If you would like an idea or two? I know I can't tell teachers how to teach because
I know one of us had to teach a very dry topic, the regions, the United States regions.
United States region?
Yeah, all the different regions in the United States, like splitting the United States into different areas and learning about their economy and agricultural and industry and those different sections.
That's a fun one for a map, and they could draw some of the things. They could have a big map, and maybe a group of them could do a segment of it, and they could put, like if it's the coal industry, they can put a picture of a lump of coal, or they can have people digging coal, depends how old they are, or anything like that. And then the regions of the country could all be different colors from each other. And so the little group that would be doing what they do, what they're manufacturing or whatever they're famous for, they can have fun putting the pictures together, and they'll know. Another thing is sightseeing and national parks are in those regions too, and that's a fun thing to include. And if they manufacture coats, you can put people dressed up in coats or clothing, or funny furniture if they're from North Carolina, or if they're doing cars from Detroit. It's fun to make cartoon cars. Somebody's riding in a cartoon car, and they can make this big so that 4 kids can work on it. So it'd be real big. So it would be memorable. You could have kind of a contest between them all to see who got the coolest region, whose region is the most fun to visit, or has the weirdest thing that they manufacture. And so they can explore and find out what that is, and they can search states in that region. Or I don't know if I'm along the right track for this, but it's a good way to make things sink in a little bit. And that wouldn't take very long. It'd be a couple days or a day, as short as that, or it could be a longer set of problems about that. I don't know if that helps any.
Well, it sounds too like you're talking about writing and illustrating as a way to show or demonstrate your understanding of the different sources that you've read and the different things that you've explored. So that would be where the comprehension piece comes through, and the reading.
So say you're in a manufacturing area, and it's possible for you to talk to somebody who does that. That is something that would be interesting to do. People are responsive to kids. It's surprising. You wouldn't think they would be, but their parents know people, and or you can find people, or you can write to there are people you can write to, and government people, and in business, and you can call people, and it's really okay. Sometimes you get results.
Yeah.
Depending how old you are and how sophisticated you are. And we'll do it for their newspapers in high school, and you guys aren't up at that level. But I see young kids do this a lot. It's not unheard of.
So some of the things that were noticed was the fact that when you had all those books on your research for your latest book, I noticed that there was a lot of marking up, and I just thought of Michael, who talked about whenever he reads nonfiction, he likes to use Post-it notes, and we saw some things dog-eared and things like that to kind of identify. So you were using some of the strategies that we talked about. Yep.
There you go. This is Jefferson Davis's Private Letters, 1823 to 1889. It's just sitting here. You can see I put the ones, when I put the tabs in there, I label them, what that quote is about, so that I don't have to look at each and every one of them.
Yeah.
And Mine are real sloppy, but whatever. If it's really good, I put a star on it. And so all these big fat books, the ones I took back to the library, I had to peel out 10 million of those little sticky notes or labels before I could take it back in, because I was afraid. Oh,
that's really good to see that and to model that for kids. We also heard how meticulous you were in writing your books, and how in order to even write, you had to do a lot of reading. And I think that that's a really important message for kids, because I think sometimes, like even with our class, when we wrote about our family members, they had to do a lot of listening, and they also had to do some reading to find out historical context and things like that. So that writing came through as the way that they processed all of that media that they were getting. So that was really cool. And I don't know if anybody else realized the detail that Roz is accurate with her illustrations and the maps and things like that. We were talking about how a lot of times kids, when they read nonfiction, they just try to get through the book, and they don't necessarily read the headings or look at the maps or do things like that, because they just kind of like try to plow through. So that was good to bring that to our attention as well.
Yeah, that's what the teachers are so good at, and figuring out what they call close reading, and determining what it means. This is especially important in the Civil War book, where everybody has different opinions from everybody else to the nth degree, and so much so that they're willing to kill each other over their different opinions. So when I put stuff like that in my books, I have to make sure that the person wasn't playing politics and that everything's 100% kosher, accurate, or whatever. And so sometimes the reason this is good is because I can actually show both points of view on the same page, and they can be opposite from each other. This is the reason we're doing this, and we think it's absolutely right. No, this is the reason we're doing it. We think it's absolutely right. And then you can make your own opinion. But yeah, you have to be so careful it's accurate. And since you guys are teachers, if the kids go online, you have to make sure the sites are accurate, and it's not just some kid's book report that's faulty, or somebody who has a political point of view. You have to make sure it's good. That's why I use books like the ones I've shown you that can't be fudged, or most of them are by Pulitzer Prize winners that I've used. So that doesn't mean they're 100% correct, but boy, are they sure a good source that's better than the regular guy.
Yep.
And so that's what I'm hoping for.
Does anybody have any additional questions or comments? So Lisa wants to know how long it takes you to make a book, from the time you get an idea until it's ready to sell.
Okay, I've taken, on the nonfiction books, they take a lot longer. And one reason they take so long is because I'm not only doing the writing, the research, but also the illustrations. So they take anywhere from 6 months to 3 years. George versus George took 2 years. This Lincoln book is taking 3 years, and it's only 64 pages. But it has to be perfect, because it's a really, really important topic right now in America. All the stuff that's going on, like North Carolina, et cetera, et cetera. It's very important to get it right, and there's so much false material out there. And so I think it's real timely, and I wish that after I finish it, it takes another year for it to get into production, which is why it's not going to be out for a while. I finish it in October, and it won't be out for a year after that. And it's really timely stuff, so it takes 3 years. 3 years, that's killer. And that's working 7 days a week and every night.
Oh, Roz.
It's crazy. It's insane.
So
Don't do it.
We were talking.
But your kids can do something similar, and they can get a taste of it in a week. And
we were talking about stamina this morning and how kids have to build up stamina, and I think that you might be, you might get the Stamina Queen Award.
I don't know if that's a good award, but yeah, I might get that. Just, there's a world out there. I need to go see it instantly. So as soon as we're done, I will.
Well, we are really grateful that you took time out of your day to spend with us, and that we got even a sneak peek of what you're going to be publishing in the near future.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. And I always like talking to your groups. They're always fun and attentive, and I hope you got a few hints. I didn't write my little list of hints this time, but I hope you got some ideas. And if anything comes of this, or if your kids make a big book or a map or do an excursion, I'd love to hear about it too, because it's real helpful to all teachers to know what everybody's doing. So I can kind of be a conduit for that a little bit. And also find out about Amy's classes that wrote their histories, because that's great. I don't know if she already told you, but if she didn't, she should tell you, because it was wonderful. It was terrific. So thanks very much for having me.
You were wonderful.
Thank you, Roz. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah, you too.
Take care.
Okay, take care of yourself. Bye-bye.